if you have Bitcoin and you put it in a wallet and you own that wallet with remembering 24 words, you can go anywhere in the world. And as long as you have your mind and like you're mobile, like no one can steal that Bitcoin. And that alone, like even that to me was pretty revolutionary. And that's something I really believe in. Also my experience of backpacking in 95 countries and seeing the way a lot of people live. I just can't even get to tell you how important that application is to me.
I feel like obviously I kind of in a way fundamentally agree. I actually think that use case has always been interesting because people, I think, tend to take this idea of like, I can escape with my money, which I want to talk about like logistically how that works. And then conflate it with this like broader, almost idealistic state of I can use a non-local currency, like a digital version, let's call it Bitcoin for a second, but it could be anything on a day-to-day basis, which I think is very much not true. Um, the first one I think is an interesting case of like, all right, there's this like 48-hour, 72-hour window where theoretically, like I want to escape, right? And step one is I have to get as many of my assets as possible into Bitcoin or some alternative, right? I have to get into Ethereum, which I guess my first question in all of
Let me,
this is
let me
always
give
just
you an
like,
example.
how?
Yeah.
How do you get
So
your local? Yeah. You see where I'm going with this? Like, how do you get your money into Bit?
of course,
Assuming you haven't done it consistently up front. I understand that you don't have to do
yeah.
anything. Where do you get the main set of
So
dollars? Like, how do you get it in?
yeah. So first of all, I would hope that some people have been getting it in consistently before, similar to how a lot of people store gold and other kind of precious metals and things for this downside case. Let's say hypothetically you live in a country where like quite literally let's say you're a Persian Jew
Mm.
and there were 200,000 of them in Tehran in Iran at the time. And in a population of, I don't know the population of Iran at the time, but call it 20 million, to call it 1%. Let's say that everyone in Iran on average had 1% of their net worth in Bitcoin. You're 1% of the population. That's a lot of Bitcoin that's laid in the country. If you go and just start peer to peer in 48 hours for 50 cents on the dollar, instead of exchanging for, your valuables for diamonds, like literally giving the title to your real estate or, giving a car or whatever, instead of exchanging that for gold or diamonds, if you're exchanging it for crypto keys where people are literally,
Right. Like
you know,
I go to you and I say,
yeah,
here's my car.
yeah,
Hopefully you have some savings, which as you know, most people don't, right? So
that's
like,
not true though. People have savings, just not as much relative to other places. And Iran in
yeah,
1979 was actually a very prosperous place.
totally. No. I agree. That's like an interesting use case going back to Iran, but
And I'm just
e-
saying, so would you rather, like, quite literally, if you're in that scenario today, would you rather try to convert your assets into, say, diamonds and gold and precious metals that you can try to, and maybe some dollars that you can try to smuggle out? We have to ship it in a trunk and people can intercept it at the border.
yeah.
Or would you rather get it all in a crypto wallet where all you have to do is remember a 24-word password?
I mean,
Um,
my concern if I were in this situation is that at a certain point, owning crypto in many of these places, if people are consistently escaping, will be illegal by decree, right? And in many cases, it probably already is getting close to that. And then I've got to go and convert my physical assets, house, whatever, into crypto, which means I've got to go to other people, locals, probably that I know, or maybe kind of pseudo know, because no one individual has enough savings to like really match. I've got to go to like a bunch of people to do this.
and so it's just,
I'm not suggesting either of these are good situations, to be very clear, but like each one of those is now a digital transaction that is recorded and monitored by the local government because it is like definitionally recorded.
how is it record, like, it's recorded if you're using Coinbase or centralized exchange. It's not recorded if you have your crypto in a wallet that they don't know about.
But like, you think there's going to be hundreds or thousands of people in these countries where Bitcoin is illegal that have unknowable wallets that the government doesn't just like show up and check?
I'm not saying there'll be hundreds or thousands, but I'm saying Bitcoin is the first way to actually accomplish the goal I'm setting out. And
No, I just think of it as like the risk I introduce by going to, and let's just call it 100. I don't, it doesn't matter, but I have to go to like 100 unique
you don't have
individuals.
to go to 100 people. If everyone on average has 1% of their net worth, if there's one person that's really wealthy, that
Right.
like maybe you go to one person, like
Right. And then that person sends me,
two people.
that person sends me Bitcoin, right? And then a bunch of other people do. And I have to hope. And again, this is unfortunate. I'm not suggesting. I have to hope. Hold on. I have to hope.
But also, we're getting in the weeds now because.
Well, but that's how this is actually how it happens for somebody, right? Because they have to get the Bitcoin to be able to escape.
But Zach, if you go all the way back to the beginning, you had made a premise that if you don't have Bitcoin to begin with. And
no, and I'm suggesting even if they do, let's say they do, I'm going to give you the assumption that some people could,
no. I'm saying, let's say you as the individual, let's say you as Zach, the Jew in
Iran,
or wherever in the world, let's say that you're already holding 20% of your net worth in a Bitcoin wallet where you have the key to it. Then you can now leave the country.
By the way, illegal for me to do that, to be very clear, right? Like in these situations, that would probably be illegal for me to own. I believe it is a good thing that they have an alternative to trying to buy diamonds and smuggling them in their coat. I agree with that. I really hope it works. I worry about the government being able to monitor transactions because they control the internet and they see everything that goes on either through cell phones or through the actual physical wires because it's an autocratic nation that doesn't have any laws that can monitor you. Like I just kind of worry about the logistics of this. Like it's hard. And by the way, it's fine. I agree. Like this is an interesting use case. It's kind of like almost the only one where I'm like, okay, that makes sense for this little window.
That was my goal. My goal was to get you to find at least one because it's a spectrum. And now we know that you're on the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely on the spectrum. No, I will fully readily say if somebody is trying to escape, and they have a better mechanism to do so, owning Bitcoin or Ethereum, or frankly, anything that has at least some semblance of stability out there. And I agree, there will always be some like blockchain that has some semblance of holding it. Not everything's going to zero, clearly. That this is like a nice alternative for them. My worry is like, okay, that makes sense. Where's the rest of the market that we're holding up in these use cases that are supposed to be more on a consistent basis? Because that's like the one-time use case, right? You hopefully only have to use that one time. And then eventually you want to get your Bitcoin back to fiat in the country that you escape to, right? Because you want to use it.
I mean, similar to how if you hold gold, you want to get it into some fungible thing that you can go use in that new place. Like if you make it to the promised land or America. Anyways, glad that we're in agreement on it.
We nailed it. Logan, podcast over. Zach admitted there's a use case in Bitcoin that makes sense. Okay, yeah, sounds good. That works for me.
I knew you were on board with the smuggling out of autocratic nations.
I'm on board.
The question is just how big is I mean, obviously there's been from a quality of human life standpoint, like it's amazing that this can exist, right?
I think we probably agree on like at least 90% of things, even in crypto, and probably even more than that outside of crypto.
Maybe the part that is frustrating about all of this is like then people take these logical leaps to the next set of conclusions, which are just like generally not true or accurate. And then we have, what I think of as the hype cycle, because people take this idea that like, well, if one person could do it, imagine if it's just like, that's just not how this actually plays out in any way. So my issue with the whole thing is not the like alternative for an individual. I actually think that's fantastic. And I'm glad we have it. Look, having an alternative for an individual, like it's hard to argue that that's not a good thing.
Sean, one of the things that in these use cases that we're talking about, like there's a lot of either technical acumen required by people to be able to do this, or a lot of middlemen and brokers to enable some of this stuff, right? And inevitably the on-ramp, as things get easier, you need companies behind them for the on-ramp to exist, right? To like lower the barrier so that it broadens out. which then leads to centralization inevitably, right? Because now those people control. You can see it with, OpenSea, right? When people are,
Yeah.
claim that they've been hacked.
The
OpenSea,
Moxie post, the Jack Dorsey comments. Look, I agree with 90. And Moxie's friend of mine. I agree with 95% of all of that. I would just say, and we can table the Web3 conversation as I get or crypto conversation, move on to something else. I would just say, I think you guys know now what motivated me into the space. And with everything else, at Sequoia, we haven't made nearly as many investments as other people. We try to be very principled. We've mainly invested in infrastructure, like totally acknowledge the centralization and totally acknowledge the weird dichotomy of like, if you want to have mass onboarding of people, it's going to create a lot of centralization. And that is a weird kind of perverse thing.